Imagine walking into a family gathering after 10 years and locking eyes with someone you never expected to feel sparks with. I never thought I'd find myself back in Texas. The heat clung to my skin. The moment I stepped out of the airport, wrapping me in a scent of dry grass and sun-baked asphalt. I was born here, spent my first 10 years running barefoot across my grandmother's yard before Dad's promotion pulled us to another city. Now, after years away, a transfer had brought me home just in time to finish my bachelor's degree. That Saturday, my parents insisted I come to a family gathering at Aunt Clara's ranch outside San Antonio. "You need to see everyone," Mom had said, her voice bright through the phone. "They've missed you." I hadn't expected much, just the usual barbecue smoke, laughter, and the low hum of country music drifting from a speaker on the porch. But then I saw him. Matthew. He stood near the old oak, talking to one of our cousins, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. 10 years had turned the lanky boy I vaguely remembered into someone startlingly handsome. The brim of his hat shaded eyes the color of summer honey, and when he smiled at something our cousin said, dimples flashed across his cheeks. My heart tripped over itself. We were technically distant relatives. Our grandfathers were brothers. As kids, we'd sat side by side at long holiday tables, sharing mashed potatoes and awkward jokes. I remembered a shy grin, a cowlick that refused to lie flat, and the way he'd once offered me half of his popsicle because mine had melted in the sundae. Now, all I could see was how broad his shoulders had become, how the sleeves of his shirt clung to his arms. I felt suddenly, stupidly self-conscious standing there in my jeans and white tee. He looked up, caught my gaze across the yard. Recognition flickered, followed by surprise, then a slow smile that made the air seem hotter than it already was. "Joseph?" His voice was deeper, warmer than I remembered. "Yeah," I said, my own voice sounding unsure even to me. "It's been a while." We didn't get a chance to talk right away. Relatives kept sweeping me into hugs, asking about school, about the move back. Through it all, I was aware of Matthew somewhere nearby, laughing with uncles, tossing a football with kids, moving easily through the crowd. Later, when the sun began to dip and Aunt Clara called everyone inside to help with dessert, I found myself in the kitchen with him. We were tasked with arranging pies and scooping vanilla ice cream while the adults chatted in the living room. "Can you hand me that knife?" he asked, nodding toward the counter. I passed it over, careful not to brush his fingers. My pulse was loud in my ears. "So," he said, cutting neat slices of pecan pie, "you're back in Texas for good?" "Yeah." I transferred to finish my bachelor here. I kept my tone casual, though nerves prickled under my skin. His eyebrows lifted. "Which university?" "State U." A grin spread across his face. "You're kidding. I'm there too last year of engineering." The coincidence tugged a smile from me. "Guess we're classmates now." "Guess so." He leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something about standing there with him, just the two of us, surrounded by the scent of sugar and butter, felt strangely intimate. I wanted to ask everything: how his life had been, what he liked, what he dreamed about. Instead, I kept slicing cheesecake, pretending my hands were steady. We talked about classes, about how both of us were counting down the months until graduation. He mentioned weekend hiking trips, and I admitted I hadn't explored much since moving back. Our conversation flowed easier with each minute, laughter breaking the initial shyness. By the time Aunt Clara came in to fetch the desserts, I didn't want the moment to end. That night, after the last goodbyes were said and I was lying in my old room at my parents' house, I found myself scrolling through Facebook. My thumb hesitated over the search bar before typing Matthew Rhodes. His profile picture showed him at the edge of a lake, sunlight catching in his hair. Without overthinking, I hit Add Friend. Almost instantly, a notification popped up. "Matthew accepted your friend request." A simple action, but it left me smiling at the glow of my phone long after midnight. Classes had barely started when I finally gathered the nerve to message Matthew. For a week, I'd been staring at his profile picture, wondering if texting him would seem eager or just friendly. The second Friday of the semester, I sat on my dorm bed and typed, "Hey, want to grab coffee sometime on campus?" I almost deleted it twice before pressing send. The reply came faster than I expected. "Sure, I'm free after class tomorrow. There's a cafe near the library." Saturday afternoon, the campus buzzed with the soft chaos of early semester energy students hurrying between buildings, skateboard wheels clicking on concrete, the smell of roasted coffee drifting through the warm air. I spotted Matthew sitting at a table outside the cafe, One leg stretched out casually, a book open in front of him. He looked up, smiled, and waved me over. "Hey, Joseph!" "Hey!" I sat opposite him, trying not to seem too aware of how the sunlight caught the curve of his jaw. We ordered drinks, iced lattes, and settled in. At first, our talk circled around classes. Professors we liked, group projects we dreaded. Soon it wandered into stories about our grandparents, how his granddad once built a treehouse that all the cousins fought over, how my grandma kept a candy jar locked up because we'd raid it every visit. "I remember sneaking you a piece," he said with a grin. "You always took the risk." I laughed. I was the lookout. It felt easy, like picking up an old rhythm we hadn't realized was still there. When a breeze ruffled the pages of his book, he caught them with a hand that was strong and sun-browned from working outdoors. I caught myself watching the motion, then quickly looked away, heat rising in my face. "What?" he asked, eyes bright with curiosity. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just thinking how much has changed since we were kids." He studied me for a beat, something unreadable flickering behind his expression, then nodded. "Yeah, 10 years is a long time." The afternoon stretched comfortably. Students passed by, laughter drifting across the patio, but our little corner felt almost private. When the sky turned peach, Matthew closed his book. "I should head to the workshop before it gets dark," he said. "Want to walk together?" We strolled along shaded paths, talking about professors, weekend plans, random memories. Every so often, our shoulders brushed, sending a quiet spark through me. At the entrance to the engineering building, he paused. "Glad you texted," he said. "I didn't know if you'd want to hang out." "I'm glad too," I admitted, my voice softer than I meant. He gave me that slow smile again, the one that made me feel 16 and reckless, and then he headed inside, leaving me standing there with my pulse humming. That night I couldn't focus on homework. I kept replaying fragments of our conversation, the way his eyes warmed when he talked about fixing engines with his dad, the way he listened when I told him about writing essays late at night. Something quiet but undeniable had settled between us, like the faint scent of cedar after rain, easy to miss unless you paid attention. I didn't know what it meant yet. All I knew was that I wanted to see him again. The idea started as a passing comment in the cafe a week later. We were both tired from exams, nursing mugs of coffee that had long gone cold. "Remember that old lake behind Grandpa Henry's place?" Matthew asked, stirring the ice that had melted at the bottom of his cup. "I used to camp out there with my brothers." "Yeah," I said, smiling at the memory of summers spent chasing dragonflies and skipping stones across glassy water. "I haven't been there in years." He leaned back, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Want to go this weekend? We could drive up, see if it still looks the same." The invitation landed somewhere deep inside me, half excitement, half nerves. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual though my heart was already racing. Saturday dawned with a pale blue sky and the promise of heat. I met Matthew in the parking lot outside my dorm. His old pickup was dusty but solid, smelling faintly of pine from the air freshener swinging on the mirror. The drive stretched for miles, fields rolling out in every direction. We talked about nothing and everything: music, professors, awkward childhood stories neither of us had ever told. Laughter kept bubbling up, light and unforced. As the road narrowed to gravel, a quiet settled between us. Sunlight flickered through branches arching over the path, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of being alone with him, far from anyone who might overhear or interrupt. When we reached the lake, the sight made me pause. The water shimmered under the noon sun, ringed by tall pines and wildflowers. A breeze rippled across its surface, carrying the scent of earth and summer. "It hasn't changed," Matthew said, climbing out of the truck. He walked to the edge, skipping a flat stone across the surface. It bounced 3 times before sinking. I joined him, letting my gaze wander across the familiar shoreline. For a moment, I could almost see our younger selves running barefoot through the shallows, voices high with laughter. We wandered along the bank, eventually finding a rough log bench near a small woodland campsite. We sat, shoulders almost touching, watching sunlight scatter across the water. For a while, we didn't talk. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, just full like the air before a summer storm. "You ever think about how different we are from who we used to be?" Matthew said at last. "Every day," I admitted. "But being here, it's like some part of us never left." He looked at me then, eyes steady and searching. "Joseph," he began, then stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't want to make this weird, but Have you felt something since we started hanging out? The question hung in the warm air, fragile as a dragonfly wing. I swallowed. Yeah, I said quietly. I didn't know if I should say anything. A small smile tugged at his lips. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. Me neither. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. We sat there, hearts loud in our chests, caught in a space that felt suspended from the rest of the world. Slowly, almost cautiously, he reached out. His fingers brushed mine, light as a question. I didn't pull away. We stayed like that, hands barely touching, until he turned toward me. His face was close enough that I could see the flecks of amber in his eyes, the way sunlight threaded through his hair. When he leaned in, I felt myself mirror the movement without thinking. Our lips met softly, a tentative press filled with uncertainty and something deeper we couldn't yet name. The kiss was brief, just enough to make the world tilt. We pulled back, eyes wide, a rush of unspoken thoughts between us. Was that okay? He asked, voice low. I think so, I said, though my pulse was still a wild rhythm in my ears. I just don't know if it's, the right thing. Because of us being related? Yeah. I let out a shaky breath. We're distant, but still. He nodded slowly, gaze dropping to where our knees brushed. I've been thinking about that too. I don't want to mess things up or make life complicated. For a while, we sat in silence, the lake lapping gently at the shore. But even as uncertainty settled between us, I couldn't ignore the warmth lingering where his lips had touched mine. Something real had taken root, fragile but alive. As the sun began to dip, painting the water gold, Matthew stood. We should head back before it gets dark. I followed him to the truck, the weight of what had happened pressing lightly on my chest. Neither of us spoke much on the drive home, each lost in our own tangle of thoughts. Yet every time I glanced at him, the corners of his mouth hinted at a smile as if he, too, felt the quiet shift that had changed everything. Grandma's birthday fell 2 weeks after the lake trip. I'd been restless since that day by the water, thoughts of Matthew threading through every lecture and study session. The kiss had been soft, almost shy, yet it left a mark I couldn't brush away. But with it came a tangle of doubts about family, about expectations, about whether we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The celebration was held in Grandma's sunlit backyard, long tables crowded with casseroles and sweet tea. Laughter rose over the clatter of plates, cousins chasing one another across the grass. Matthew arrived late, balancing a cake box, sunlight glinting in his hair. My heart gave a quiet leap, though I kept my face neutral, afraid someone might read too much. We exchanged a nod, polite and practiced, and slipped back into the bustle of family life. I wanted to ask how he'd been, if he'd thought about the lake as much as I had, but every time I took a step toward him, someone else claimed my attention, an aunt offering pie, an uncle asking about school. After lunch, I caught a glimpse of him near the fence, laughing with a cousin. There was no sign of the boy who'd looked at me with hesitant tenderness only a fortnight before. He seemed steady, at ease, while I felt like a live wire. When our eyes met across the yard, something shuddered in his expression. He turned back to the conversation, and I felt a sharp, inexplicable ache. Later, as the sun dipped low, I found him stacking chairs by the porch. I walked over, nerves twisting inside me. Hey, I said quietly. Hey. He didn't quite meet my gaze. About the lake. My voice faltered. Did I mess everything up? He shook his head quickly. No, it's just complicated. We're family, even if it's distant. And I keep thinking about how everyone would react if they knew. I know, I admitted. I've been worried about the same thing. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of unease. I don't want to hurt anyone, or make things weird. And honestly, I don't even know if what I'm feeling is... He stopped, then sighed. I just don't want to risk ruining what we already have. A lump formed in my throat. So, you think we should stop? I think maybe we need space, at least until we figure out what this really means. The words stung, though I knew he wasn't wrong. We stood there, silent, until Grandma called for group photos. We joined the others, smiles fixed in place while an invisible wall settled between us. Over the next few weeks, we drifted like boats pulled apart by a quiet tide. At school, we nodded in passing but rarely lingered. I threw myself into assignments, telling myself I didn't care, but at night I scrolled through our old messages, thumb hovering over the keyboard, never brave enough to send a hello. The distance gnawed at me, not just the absence of his smile or the warmth of his voice, but the loss of the easy friendship we'd built before anything else complicated it. One afternoon, I spotted him in the quad, laughing with classmates, head tipped back in sunlight. For a heartbeat, I almost walked over. Instead, I turned away, heart heavy. I began to wonder if I'd imagined everything at the lake, if that quiet, tentative kiss had been nothing more than a moment of nostalgia and summer haze. But then I'd remember the way his fingers had trembled against mine, the way he'd looked at me before leaning in, and I knew it had been real. We were caught between wanting and fearing, between the warmth we'd found and the rules we weren't sure we were allowed to break. A month passed, quiet and heavy. I buried myself in coursework, late nights at the library, weekend shifts at the cafe. But no matter how many pages I read or cups I poured, the space Matthew had left inside me stayed. Then, one morning, Facebook flashed a notification. It's Matthew's birthday today. His profile picture, sunlit hair, lake water in the background pulled me back to every moment I'd tried not to think about. My fingers hovered over my phone. I could just write a quick, happy birthday, the kind everyone sends. But I didn't want to be just another message lost among emojis and generic wishes. Finally, I typed, "Happy birthday, Matt. Hope you're having a good one. I miss talking to you." I almost deleted the last sentence, but something in me insisted it stay. Minutes crawled by before his reply lit up the screen. "Thanks, Joseph. I miss you too. Want to meet up later? There's a park near campus, 5 p.m. My pulse leapt. The park was quiet that afternoon, the air soft with the scent of early autumn. Leaves skittered across the path as I made my way toward a small wooden bridge. Matthew stood there, hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile tugging at his lips. "Hey," he said. "Hey." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped forward, and he did too, and suddenly we were hugging an embrace both tentative and desperately needed. When we pulled back, he looked down, then back at me. "I hated the silence," he admitted. "I kept telling myself it was for the best, but I missed you." "I missed you too," I said, my voice rougher than I expected. We sat on a nearby bench watching ducks ripple the surface of the pond. The quiet between us felt different now, expectant rather than heavy. "I've been thinking a lot," Matthew began, "about what happened at the lake, about us." "Me too." "I don't regret it," he said slowly, "but I was scared about family, about what it means that we're related. Even if it's distant, it's still there." I nodded, heart pounding. "I've been scared too. Not because I don't want this, but because I don't want to hurt anyone or lose what we have." He turned toward me, expression steady but vulnerable. "I don't want to pretend nothing's here. I like you, Joseph, more than I ever expected." The air seemed to hold its breath. "I like you too," I whispered. "I don't know exactly how we fit into the world, but I want to find out with you." Relief softened his face. He reached for my hand, fingers threading through mine. The warmth of that simple touch steadied me in a way nothing else had in weeks. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We take it slow," he said. "We keep being honest. And when we're ready, we figure out how to tell the people who matter." I smiled small, but real. "Together?" "Together." He leaned closer, giving me enough time to pull back if I wanted. I didn't. Our lips met again, firmer this time, a promise carried on the faint breeze. When we finally separated, we stayed there, hands still entwined, watching the late afternoon sun turn the water to gold. Whatever came next, awkward conversations, questions, the work of explaining something that didn't fit easily into family stories, we would face it side by side. For now, there was only the quiet steadiness of being seen, and the possibility stretching wide before us like the sky over the park. From that day, we spent even more time together at the university, moving through the day with an ease that felt almost natural. Small moments stretched into something larger, sharing quiet spaces, trading smiles, and letting the hours slip by unnoticed. We also took a long drive to the places we used to go when we were kids, the familiar roads carrying memories back to us. As the day faded, it felt like we had come full circle, yet something new was beginning. The story didn't need words to end, it simply settled into silence, leaving everything open. So, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. We'd also love to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like this? Catching feelings for a distant relative or someone close to your family and not knowing what to do? Share your thoughts and advice in the comments below.